If you've ever finished a conversation feeling exhausted, confused, or with a pressure in your chest that wasn't there before, it's no coincidence. There are people who don't raise their voices, don't insult, don't shout, but they still leave you drained. People who, after talking to them, make you doubt yourself, make you feel guilty, drag you into unnecessary conflicts, or steal a peace that you worked hard to build. And the worst part is not that such people exist. The worst thing is not knowing how to deal with them without losing yourself. Because when you don't know how to act, you do one of two things. Or you confront them and play their game, or you stay silent, endure, and wear yourself down inside. Both options take you further away from inner peace. Buddhist wisdom does not teach you to run away from toxic people, nor to attack them, nor to convince them, nor to change them. It teaches you something much more powerful: how to relate to them without allowing them to alter your internal state. Because your peace doesn't depend on others changing, but on how you position yourself in relation to them. Buddha understood something that modern psychology confirms today. Not everyone is at the same level of awareness, and when you interact without realizing that, you end up paying a very high emotional price. You try to reason with someone who lives from reaction. You're trying to please someone who thrives on conflict. You try to explain to someone who doesn't want to understand. You try to be fair to someone who doesn't seek justice, but control. And in that constant attempt, you wear yourself out. Toxic people are not always bad people. Often they are wounded, unconscious people, trapped in their own patterns of fear, guilt, lack, or frustration. But understanding this doesn't mean allowing them to cross your internal boundaries. Here is the first great Buddhist teaching you need to integrate. Not everyone deserves access to your inner energy. Your energy is not infinite. Your attention span is not infinite. Your calm is not infinite. And every time you try to save, convince, or please someone who lives from conflict, you are giving away something very valuable: your balance. Buddhism doesn't talk about rejection. It talks about discernment. He doesn't talk about hate. He talks about clarity. He doesn't speak of harshness. He speaks of serene firmness. There are people you can open up to, and there are people with whom you must close yourself off internally, even if on the outside you remain polite, respectful, and proper. That difference is key. One of the most common traps is believing that protecting your inner peace is selfish. It isn't. It's a responsibility. It's emotional maturity. It's about respecting yourself. Buddha taught that inner peace is like a flame. If you constantly expose it to the winds of conflict, it will eventually die out. Not because she is weak, but because she was not protected. Toxic people usually do something very specific. They try to drag you into their emotional state. If they're angry, they want you to be angry too. If they live in drama, they want you to enter it. If they're frustrated, they'll take it out on you. If they live in complaint, they need a constant listener. And when you react emotionally, even if you're right, you've already lost something important: your center. Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to win arguments. It asks you not to lose your peace. Because you can win 1,000 arguments and still live in constant tension. This is where the real learning begins. Learning not to react automatically. Not from repression, but from awareness. Reacting is easy. Responding with presence is difficult, but transformative. When a toxic person provokes, manipulates, criticizes, or drains, they do so from an unconscious pattern. And if you respond from emotion, you connect with that pattern. But if you respond calmly, you break the cycle. This doesn't mean you should always stay silent. It means choosing where you act from. The first step to protecting your inner peace is understanding that not every comment deserves a response, and not every provocation deserves your energy. Conscious silence, when it arises from clarity, is a profound form of power. The monks have known this for centuries. When someone wants to take you out of your center, it's not about defending yourself, but about not abandoning that center. Your peace is not negotiable. Your calmness is inexplicable. Your balance is beyond question. And when you understand this, something begins to change. You stop justifying yourself. Stop over-explaining. You stop getting involved in dynamics that you know will end badly. You stop carrying emotions that are not yours. You start observing more and reacting less. You start listening without absorbing. You begin to be present without getting too emotionally involved. That's applied wisdom. But to achieve this, you need to understand something even deeper. Why toxic people have so much power over you. Not about others, about you. Because not all people affect you the same way. There is something specific that they activate within you. And until you see that clearly, they will continue to have an influence on your peace. That's the next step on the path. If toxic people have so much power over your inner peace, it's not just because of what they say or do, but because of what they awaken within you. This is an uncomfortable truth, but profoundly liberating. No one can pull you off your center if there isn't something inside you that's still out of balance, seeking approval, fearing conflict, or trying to be accepted at any cost. Buddha taught that the external world has no direct power over your mind. It only acts as a mirror. Toxic people reflect unresolved internal issues, fear of rejection, a need for validation, guilt, attachment to false harmony, or difficulty setting boundaries. When someone manipulates you emotionally, they don't do it just with words. They do it by touching an internal chord that still resonates. That's why some people can live with a difficult person without losing their temper, while others are drained after 5 minutes of conversation. The difference isn't in the toxic person, but in the level of self-awareness of the person dealing with them. Herein lies a key Buddhist teaching. Don't fight the person. Observe the reaction they evoke in you. That reaction is your true field of work. When someone provokes you and you feel anger, anxiety, or guilt, Buddhism doesn't ask you to judge yourself or suppress the emotion, but rather to observe it honestly. What part of you is activated? What inner need is being touched? Often you react because you confuse peace with the absence of conflict. You think that staying calm means avoiding saying what you feel, giving in, adapting, staying silent. But that's not peace, it's buildup. And what builds up unconsciously eventually explodes or makes you sick from within. True inner peace isn't forced silence, it's unwavering clarity. It's knowing who you are, what you allow, and what you don't, without needing to constantly explain it. Toxic people can sense when someone lacks this inner clarity because they unconsciously seek out places to unleash their chaos. Buddha said that a confused mind becomes a refuge for the suffering of others, not because you are weak, but because you are permeable. And being permeable without awareness is dangerous for your emotional balance. Therefore, the next step is not to change your outward behavior, but to strengthen your inner core. When your core is solid, provocations bounce off. Not because you are cold, but because they no longer need to penetrate. Not because you ignore the other person, but because you don't identify with their emotional state. This begins with a very concrete practice, separating what is yours from what isn't. When someone complains, criticizes, manipulates, or projects their own emotions, ask yourself internally, does this belong to me? Most of the time, the answer is no. But because you don't pause, you absorb emotions that aren't yours to take on. Buddhist wisdom teaches that not everything that comes to you needs to enter. You can listen without absorbing. You can understand without burdening yourself. You can be present without becoming overly emotionally involved. This ability is what truly protects your inner peace. Toxic people often live trapped in repetitive cycles, always the same drama, the same complaints, the same conflicts. And when you enter that cycle by reacting, justifying yourself, or defending yourself, you become part of it. But when you observe without getting involved, something changes. The cycle breaks. Here's something important. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to win. You don't need to explain your position over and over again. The need to constantly explain yourself is a sign that you're seeking external validation. And where there's need, there's vulnerability. Buddhism teaches that true strength is silent. It doesn't shout. It doesn't justify itself. It doesn't seek approval. It simply stands firm. That firmness is felt, and when it's felt, toxic people lose interest or reduce their impact. But this strength doesn't come from harshness. It comes from inner consistency. It comes when you truly begin to respect yourself, when you stop silently tolerating what wears you down, when you recognize that your peace is a value, not a luxury. The respect you give to your energy determines the respect others have for it. When you begin to treat your inner peace as sacred, your decisions change. You no longer stay in draining conversations. You no longer respond impulsively. You no longer over-explain. You no longer react from a place of hurt. You no longer carry other people's emotions. You start to choose. And to choose is to have power. But there's still something fundamental to understand. How to set boundaries without fighting, without guilt, and without hardening yourself inside. Because many people confuse boundaries with aggression, when in reality the most powerful boundaries are calm, clear, and consistent. That will be the next lesson. Setting boundaries is one of the most misunderstood, yet most necessary, skills for protecting inner peace. Many people don't set boundaries because they believe doing so will make them seem harsh, cold, or confrontational. Others try to set them out of pent-up anger, and then the boundary becomes an attack. Neither of these approaches stems from wisdom. From a Buddhist perspective, a boundary is not a barrier against another person. It is an expression of inner clarity. It is not erected to punish, but to preserve balance. It is not imposed from tension, but from calm. And when a boundary arises from calm, it needs no justification. Toxic people often react badly to boundaries because they're used to operating without them. When someone starts to create emotional distance, to not get involved, to not react the way they used to, their pattern is threatened. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the dynamic changes. This is where many people back down. They see discomfort in the other person and feel guilty. They see annoyance and think they are being selfish. But Buddha taught something very clear. Guilt is a sign that you are breaking an old habit, not that you are doing something wrong. If you were always available, guilt appears when you stop being available. If you always gave in, fear appears when you stand up for yourself. If you have always absorbed other people's emotions, doubt arises when you protect yourself. That doesn't mean the limit is incorrect. It means it's new. A healthy boundary doesn't need to be explained in detail. You don't negotiate based on emotion. He does not defend himself with long arguments. It is expressed simply and is supported by coherence. Consistency is key. Saying no once and then giving in out of guilt weakens your boundaries. Saying no calmly and repeating it without drama strengthens them. Toxic people test boundaries. They observe whether you are firm or hesitant. They don't do it consciously. It's an automatic pattern. When you stand firm without anger, something powerful happens. The other person understands that they can no longer manipulate you emotionally. And when they can't manipulate you, they lose power over your peace. Buddhist wisdom teaches that you don't need to change the other person to protect yourself. You need to change your relationship with their behavior. If someone criticizes, you don't have to convince them. If someone provokes, you don't have to respond. If someone manipulates, you don't have to justify yourself. You can withdraw emotionally without withdrawing physically. This is very important. Protecting your peace doesn't always mean physically distancing yourself. Often it means not getting emotionally involved, being present without exposing yourself, listening without absorbing, responding without reacting. There is a huge difference between being available and being exposed. Constant emotional exposure is what drains you. Buddha compared the trained mind to a house with doors. The doors aren't closed, but neither are they wide open. People enter, but not just anyone can enter any room. Not everyone has access to your most intimate space. When you start living like this, your energy changes. Conversations become shorter and clearer. Conflicts decrease. Provocations lose their power. Not because others change, but because you no longer play the same game. And here's a profound truth. Inner peace isn't maintained by reacting. It's maintained by choosing. Choosing when to speak and when to be silent. When to be present and when to withdraw. When to explain and when to let silence do its work. Conscious silence is one of the most powerful boundaries there is. Not resentful silence, but clear silence. The kind that doesn't punish, manipulate, or seek attention. The silence that simply doesn't engage in dynamics you know will end badly. Toxic people thrive on reaction. When they don't get it, they become disoriented. And that disorientation is the beginning of change, although it's not always immediate. But there's still a key point you need to understand. Not everyone deserves the same level of closeness, and accepting that doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you aware. Closeness is a privilege, not an obligation. When you begin to choose with whom you share your time, your energy, and your emotional intimacy, your inner peace ceases to be fragile. It becomes stable. It becomes firm. Becomes difficult to disturb. And yet, even with clear boundaries, there will be times when someone tries to provoke you, pressure you, or throw you off balance. That's why you need more than just boundaries. You need a way to respond without losing yourself, even when the other person persists. That is the next level of Buddhist wisdom. Responding without losing yourself is an art. It's not about always staying silent or always talking. It's about not abandoning your center, no matter what's happening around you. Toxic people often persist because they perceive the slightest crack, a doubt, a guilt, a pending reaction. And as long as that crack exists, they will keep pushing. Buddhist wisdom doesn't ask you to harden yourself to defend yourself, but rather to stabilize yourself. Because when you are stable inside, no external force can dislodge you. There is an essential difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, impulsive, emotional. Responding is conscious, slow, and clear. When you react, the other person controls the pace. When you answer, you decide. A conscious response doesn't stem from a desire to win, to convince, or to impress. It stems from inner clarity. Sometimes it's a short phrase. Sometimes it's changing the subject. Sometimes it's a calm look. Sometimes it's withdrawing. Sometimes it's simply not explaining further. Toxic people crumble when they don't get what they want, an emotional reaction. They seek to justify their behavior, release tension, provoke guilt, or validate their narrative. If they don't get that, the dynamic loses its power. This is where a very powerful Buddhist teaching comes in. Not everything deserves your explanation. Over-explaining is a subtle way of giving power away to the other person. It's telling them, without words, that you need them to understand you in order to be at peace. And your peace cannot depend on that. When you answer briefly, clearly, and without emotion, you convey something very powerful. I'm here, but I'm not available for this game. That's not coldness, it's self-care. Many people confuse kindness with being constantly available. But true kindness isn't about putting yourself at risk. It's about not causing harm, starting with not harming yourself. Buddha taught that attachment to conflict is a form of suffering. Some people live in conflict because they don't know any other way to feel alive. If you enter their world, you'll sync with them. If you don't, they'll be left alone with their own noise. And here's something important. When you stop reacting, discomfort may arise. Awkward silences, distance, changes in the relationship. That's normal. It's the price of breaking out of an old pattern. But that discomfort is temporary. The peace you gain is lasting. Responding calmly doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means not responding from a place of hurt. You can say no. You can withdraw. You can set a boundary. But you do so with quiet firmness, not impulsiveness. When someone tries to provoke you and you respond calmly, something profound happens. You respect yourself. And that inner respect is the foundation of peace. There's a very clear Buddhist image. Still water reflects clearly. Turbulent water doesn't. When your mind is calm, you see the situation as it is, not as the other person wants you to see it. And from that clear perspective, your responses become simple, direct, and effective. You don't need to prepare speeches. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to stay. And here's the final key to this stage. Don't take it personally. Toxic people don't act from who you are. They act from what's inside them. When you understand this, you stop carrying emotions that aren't yours. This doesn't make you indifferent. It sets you free. When you stop taking things personally, attacks lose their power. Criticism becomes noise. Provocations fade away. Not because you're superior, but because you no longer identify with them. But all of this still needs to be integrated into a broader understanding. Not everyone should occupy the same place in your life, and accepting that is part of spiritual maturity. Reaching that understanding is essential to protecting your peace in a lasting way. Accepting that not everyone should occupy the same place in your life is one of the most profound acts of maturity. And, paradoxically, also one of the most difficult. Because for a long time, you were taught that being a good person meant always being available, always understanding, always enduring, always forgiving, always adapting. But Buddhist wisdom makes a crucial distinction. Compassion is not self-promotion. You can understand the pain of others without allowing it to invade your own. You can feel compassion without sacrificing your balance. You can respect without submitting. You can love without losing yourself. Toxic people don't always disappear from your life when you change. Sometimes they remain, in your family, at work, in circles you can't easily leave. But what does change radically is the place they occupy within you. They no longer reside at your center. They no longer dictate your emotional state. They no longer define your peace. Buddha taught that suffering arises when you allow what you cannot control to govern your mind. And few things are as uncontrollable as the behavior of others. That is why true freedom lies not in changing others, but in reorganizing your inner world. When you do this, something silent but powerful happens. Your energy becomes ordered. And when your energy is in order, relationships reconfigure themselves. Some people will drift away. Others will change their treatment. Others will try one last time to provoke a reaction. And others will simply lose influence. All of that is part of the process. You don't need to announce your change. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify it. Your calmness will be the message. There is a very particular peace that arises when you stop trying to be understood by those who don't want to understand you. A peace that doesn't come from isolation, but from discernment. You begin to reserve your energy for those who know how to nurture it. You begin to choose conversations that nourish you. You begin to know when to withdraw. You begin to listen to yourself. And that listening to you is key. Because protecting your inner peace isn't a one-off act. It's a daily practice. Every day you choose whether to react or respond. Every day you choose whether to absorb or filter. Every day you choose whether to betray yourself to avoid conflict or to respect yourself even when it's uncomfortable. Every day you choose where you place your attention. Attention is energy, and energy is life. Where you focus your attention, you focus your life. If you constantly immerse yourself in drama, conflict, and negativity, your life becomes just that. But if you consciously begin to remove yourself from those situations, your life regains lightness. Not because you ignore reality, but because you choose not to live trapped by it. Buddhist wisdom doesn't promise you a world without difficult people. It offers you something more realistic and more powerful. A mind that doesn't get carried away. A heart that doesn't harden. A center that doesn't lose its way. When you reach this point, you no longer need complicated strategies. Your mere presence changes the dynamic. Your calm becomes a limit. Your silence becomes clarity. Your calm firmness earns respect. And above all, you no longer live in fear of losing your peace, because you know how to get it back. That's the most important thing. Inner peace isn't something others can give or take away. It's something you cultivate, protect, and honor. And when you choose to do so, your life changes in a quiet but profound way. Not because the world is different, but because you no longer get lost in it. That is the true power of Buddhist wisdom applied to human relationships. To live in the world without allowing the world to live inside you. And when you understand that, toxic people cease to be a threat. They simply become signs that remind you to return to yourself. That's where true peace begins. When you understand all of this, something settles within you. You no longer feel the urge to defend yourself all the time. You no longer live in anticipation of what others will say or do. You no longer react impulsively. You begin to move from a deeper, more stable, more conscious place. Buddhist wisdom doesn't make you distant. It makes you present. Present for yourself. Present for what matters. Present for life as it is, without embellishment or unnecessary conflict. Protecting your inner peace doesn't mean building walls. It means cultivating roots. Roots so strong that even if the wind blows fiercely, it won't uproot you. Toxic people will always exist, but their influence diminishes when you stop giving them the power to define your inner state. You learn to recognize the signs early. You learn to retire in time. You learn to say little and feel a lot. You learn not to carry what is not yours. You learn to choose yourself without guilt. And, little by little, that daily choice becomes your natural way of living. There is a different kind of peace when you no longer try to fix anyone. When you can't explain yourself anymore. When you no longer stay where you are not cared for. When you no longer confuse love with constant sacrifice. When you no longer give up to avoid conflict. That peace is not euphoria. It is stillness. It's clarity. It's knowing that no matter what happens outside, there's a place inside you that you can always return to. That is what Buddha wanted to teach. Not how to escape the world, but how to inhabit it without losing yourself. Not how to eliminate difficulties, but how to go through them without breaking. Not how to control others, but how to govern your own heart. When you live from that place, toxic people stop taking up so much space. Some drift away. Others change their behavior. Others simply no longer affect you. And you keep walking, lighter, more aware, more at peace. Because in the end, true protection doesn't come from outside. It comes from knowing who you are, what you value, and how much you allow the world to enter you. That is true inner peace. And now you know how to take care of it. Something begins to change almost imperceptibly when you integrate all of this. Your relationship with yourself becomes more honest. You no longer constantly question whether you're exaggerating, whether you should hold on a little longer, whether perhaps you're too sensitive. You begin to trust your feelings. And that inner trust is one of the deepest forms of protection there is. When you trust your own perception, you no longer need others to validate your experience. If something makes you uncomfortable, you acknowledge it. If something wears you down, you accept it. If someone disturbs your peace, you don't mentally justify it. You simply take note and act accordingly. That consistency is what maintains your equilibrium, even in challenging environments. Buddhism doesn't teach you to live isolated from the world. It teaches you to live without inner turmoil. To not let every external stimulus shake your inner state. To not turn every interaction into an emotional battle. To not react as if everything were a threat. When your mind becomes more stable, you begin to notice something curious. You no longer need to prove anything. You don't need to appear strong. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to please. You don't need to have the last word. The need disappears because there is no longer an inner lack. And that lack of need is profoundly disarming for toxic people. Because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't need approval. They can't provoke someone who doesn't live by reaction. They can't control someone who respects themselves in silence. Something important happens here. Your peace ceases to be fragile. Before, it depended on others behaving in a certain way. Now it depends on your ability to return to yourself. And that changes everything. You start to see situations from a distance. Choose your battles, to withdraw without guilt. Speak when necessary and remain silent when wise. Treat your energy as something valuable, not as something that just anyone can take. This change isn't immediate or dramatic. It's subtle, but it's real. And when it happens, you realize you've been living with tension for too long, believing it was normal. Calmness is not passivity. It's internal domain. And that mastery doesn't make you cold. It makes you free. Because now you know that inner peace isn't a permanent state, but a constant practice of choice. Choosing not to get hooked. Choosing not to absorb. Choosing not to react. Choosing not to betray yourself. And that choice, repeated day after day, becomes your natural way of being in the world. There comes a time when you no longer need to constantly protect yourself because you've learned something far more valuable. You've learned to return to yourself. And when you know how to return to yourself, nothing and no one can permanently steal your peace. True transformation doesn't happen when toxic people disappear from your life. It happens when, even while they're still present, they no longer control your inner world. They still talk. They still act according to their patterns. They still are who they are. But you're no longer trapped there. You no longer enter their lives. You no longer carry their burdens. You no longer react the way you used to. That is spiritual maturity. Buddhist wisdom never promised a life without conflict. It promised a mind that doesn't get lost in it, a heart that doesn't harden, a presence that doesn't fragment. And when you reach that point, you begin to live with a lightness that once seemed impossible. You start to notice that you sleep better, that you breathe more deeply, that your body is no longer always tense, that your mind calms down faster. The difficult conversations no longer haunt you for hours. Don't let other people's words keep swirling around inside you. Not because you are indifferent, but because you have stopped living openly without awareness. There is a huge difference between being open and being vulnerable without limits. Being open is a strength. Being vulnerable without awareness is exhausting. Now you know when to shut down. You know when it's safe to open. You know how to withdraw without running away. You know how to stay put without exposing yourself. That's balance. Inner peace isn't the absence of external stimuli. It's the capacity for internal self-regulation. It's knowing how to return to your center when something pulls you away. It's recognizing when a conversation is no longer nourishing. It's sensing when an energy doesn't belong to you. It's choosing yourself without guilt. And here's something important that many people need to hear. Not all relationships are meant to be deep, lasting, or close. Some are there to show you boundaries. Others, to teach you how to say no. Still others, to reveal what you're no longer willing to tolerate. And that, too, is a learning experience. Buddhism doesn't idealize human relationships. It observes them realistically. It understands that each person acts from their own level of consciousness. And when you understand that, you stop taking things personally. You begin to see behaviors as expressions of inner states, not as direct attacks on your worth. This doesn't make you cold. It makes things clear. And clarity is a profound form of compassion because it prevents resentment. It prevents wear and tear. It prevents silent hatred. Clarity allows you to be at peace even when the other person is not. From this point on, protecting your inner peace becomes natural, not a constant effort. You no longer have to remind yourself of it all the time. Your body feels it. Your mind recognizes it. Your intuition alerts you, and you listen. You hear when something doesn't fit. You can hear it when a relationship drains you. You hear when a conversation has crossed a line. You listen when you need silence. You listen when you need distance. And acting from that place of listening is a sign of respect for you. Buddha taught that inner peace is not found in isolation or in controlling the world, but in mastering the mind and heart. When you master that, the world ceases to be a constant threat. Toxic people are no longer enemies. These are tests. They are reminders. These are signs that invite you to return to your center. And every time you choose not to get caught up in it, every time you choose not to react, every time you choose to take care of yourself without hardening yourself, you are strengthening something very deep inside you, your inner dignity. That dignity does not shout. It is not imposed. It's inexplicable. You can feel it. And when you feel it, your life changes quietly but steadily. You begin to surround yourself with healthier relationships. You begin to attract cleaner conversations. You begin to live with less noise, not because the world is perfect, but because you no longer get lost in it. Ultimately, protecting your inner peace is a daily decision. It's not an isolated technique, a pretty phrase, or a spiritual stance. It's a way of living, a way of being, a way of choosing yourself without guilt. And when you choose peace time and time again, one thing becomes clear. You don't need to change anyone. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to fight anyone. You just need to not give up on yourself. That is the true heart of Buddhist wisdom applied to human relationships. And when you understand this, you begin to walk through life with more calm, more clarity, and a peace that no longer depends on others. That's where everything falls into place. And if any of this has resonated with you, it's no coincidence. It means that a part of you already knew you needed to live differently, with less burden, less struggle, and more respect for your own inner balance. Buddhist wisdom doesn't arrive when everything is calm. It usually appears when you no longer want to get lost in draining dynamics. Every time you choose not to react, every time you choose to withdraw with dignity, every time you choose to nurture your energy without guilt, you are reinforcing a new way of being in the world, a more conscious way, a freer way, a more peaceful way. You don't have to do it perfectly. You don't have to do it every time. You just have to remember it when you need it most. Because inner peace is not a distant destination. It's a decision you can make right now. And the more you choose it, the more natural it becomes.